Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, here for episode 208, the wild card weekend DFS walkthrough and breakdown. Here, of course, with Byron Lambert. Byron, what the hell's going on, brother?
Oh man, just trying to keep a nice tan for you guys.
I was noticing you kind of you got the old what is
Raccoon
it?
eyes?
Yeah, you've been out. What have you been out fishing for?
I had the ski goggles on. No, I'm just kidding, man. Just endless summer around here, man. So I actually got a nice snook on the hook the other day on a live pinfish I just caught on a shrimp. It was pretty epic.
That's the trifecta to catch your own bait and then reuse the bait, right?
Yeah, man, I still got a lot to learn out here, but the pompano are starting to show up on the scene, so that's next on the menu. A real quintessential Florida table fare. My daughter, you'll love this. I'm sure the people are going to hate it, but I know she made me yesterday write a reminder. I got to go fishing with Dash today because she was jealous that Merritt got to go fishing on Christmas. Well, so sometimes those kind of things just run in your bloodlines, man. Yeah. So anyway, we'll get to it. This is the wild card breakdown. Again, you can hear this all with a subscription to the RosterWatch podcast. Go check us out on Apple Podcasts if you found us here on YouTube or Periscope or wherever for all of our content there. We will start out with, let's see. I guess we'll just go through the games, right? You don't want to go position by position. Let's go game by game, right? I think that's the format we're most accustomed to. Buffalo Bills at Houston Texans. We have a 43.5 total in this game after opening at 42. The Texans are 2.5-point favorites. 47% of the tickets are on the under, along with 62% of the money. We have 52% of the tickets on the Houston Texans, only 45% of the money. So a tiny little bit of public sentiment there for the Texans, but the Sharps don't really seem to be with them. I was telling Trash Man, I thought that the Bills might kick the Texans' ass. It'll be interesting to see. With this game, as far as the DFS plays, on the Texans side, we now have Tre'Davious White, who's saying that he doesn't anticipate shadowing DeAndre Hopkins. Last I checked, DeAndre Hopkins probably going to be like 20, maybe 25% owned in this deal. I think that's maybe a little too high with how everybody's going to be on Michael Thomas, and it's really hard to pay up for two of these guys. But I think that with no Tre'Davious, that could make people more interested in him, especially considering the fact that Will Fuller, we had the James Palmer report on NFL Network last night saying he's looking like he's very, very iffy to go. So DeAndre Hopkins, Kenny Stills, like I said, like I was talking earlier, man, how many times can we fall for that old banana in the tailpipe, right? Whenever Will Fuller can't go, Kenny Stills is lined up for a big game. We don't always get it. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Like on that side, it's like Deshaun Watson's probably not going to be too heavily owned, but it's a good defense, despite the fact we're not going to get Trey White shadowing. I don't think anybody's going to play Carlos Hyde or Duke Johnson, even on a short slate, maybe making them a little bit intriguing for contrarian plays. And then, I don't know. What do you have on the Texans side? How do you see this thing shaking out? Do you think the Texans should be 2.5-point favorites? I'm at home, but I'm with you. I very well could see the Bills pulling this one out. On the Texans side, I'm hands off of DeAndre Hopkins. He just hasn't had the type of season that supports me going in on him in this matchup. And then, look, where I've encountered some obstacles, some adversity in constructing my DFS lineups this week is finding a couple of the really cheap guys that I can get comfortable with. To get some of the other guys in, you're going to need them. So in that case, I found myself, I could be completely out of the Houston side of things, but I've found myself pivoting to Duke Johnson just at a cheap price point. I think it's kind of a low risk deal. It could be a game script that goes to his favor. If you look back on a PPR basis, he's certainly had viability that can pay off in a DFS setting this year in the right circumstances. So not super bullish on him, but in the end, that may be the Texan I have the most exposure to, just trying to find a cheap out in some of my lineups there. And then On the other side of the ball, I mean, Josh Allen's my favorite play on the entire slate.
Whoa, really? Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Josh Allen's an awesome fantasy. He's been a good fantasy quarterback. It's a good
Texas
game script.
Sucks. I mean, J.J. Watt coming back, but
it's a great game script potentially for Josh Allen, and he's kind of the engine behind that whole thing. So I expect him to do plenty of running around. You're hearing all the chatter recently about how much of a gamer and a quote-unquote football player he is. That's what I expect to see out of him in this matchup. So when I look at the slate and all the quarterbacks available to me, it's just Josh Allen comes into focus as the clearest cut option, and I'd say there's plenty of upside to boot. And then, a little bit probably, Devin Singletary may not have the upside I'm totally looking for, but certainly another rock solid play on the slate, a guy I'm very, very comfortable with. I won't say he's my favorite guy like Josh Allen, but if I'm not in my lineups that don't contain Josh Allen, I'll almost certainly have Devin Singletary. There's a chance for maybe.
I don't think there's any reason. I mean,
well, you've told me. I mean, you said this. Yeah, go ahead.
Play them all. You just play them all, right?
Yeah, you could stack it like that. I know you had that kind of theory with the Will Grier, Christian McCaffrey thing in recent weeks, and I mean,
it more
explained to me that can work. So yeah, I could see that. So those are probably my two favorite guys from that matchup. Josh Allen, my favorite guy on the slate, and then at first you're saying, well, if I'm going to get Josh Allen in, I'm probably going to want to get John Brown in on this matchup. But once again, I find myself, after I get the guys in that I really like, even though some of them aren't overly expensive, I need a cheap guy or two. And at that point, you end up coming back around to, having a look at Cole Beasley as maybe the sneakier, cheaper option that could also serve you very well in a PPR setting in this type of matchup.
Cole Beasley's only 400 less, right? I think Brown,
I'm trying to save money wherever I can in some of these deals, but yeah.
Shit, I know you. I know that's 100% true. But the 5,600 for Cole Beasley just doesn't seem like enough. And if you look at it, any of the stuff from like Football Outsiders, Sports Info Solutions, the Texans have been getting murdered by these receivers over the middle of the field. That's like the soft underbelly of the defense. It's like the Achilles heel is over the middle of the field. And that to me just sounds like a Cole Beasley monster waiting to happen in a PPR setup like DraftKings. I mean, dude, listen to his targets going back to week 12, 9, 7, 7, 6, 12. And then of course, he didn't play in week 17, but pretty huge target floor for the matchup that we're going to get here for Beasley. And he's one guy who I'm actually, I'm going to try everything I can to get Cole Beasley. I'm going to try to get Cole Beasley in my lineups on DraftKings. I don't think it's quite the same over on FanDuel. Let's see on FanDuel. He is, I remember him maybe not being quite as good an option over there, but I could be wrong. No, I mean, he's 6,300 on FanDuel, so only 1% of your salary savings, but it's still a little bit of savings, nowhere near the savings you'll get on Michael Thomas or somebody over there who we'll get to. But yeah, like Cole Beasley, like John Brown, I do like Josh Allen too. It's just for me, whenever I think the way I get on Josh Allen is if I play Cole Beasley and John Brown, right? In a lineup of Michael Thomas, Beasley, John Brown lineup, maybe you could get away from starting Breeze there in that one. But I do think that the price.
You got to start both wide receivers, you think? I just say Josh Allen's a guy who can get a lot of action on the ground, so he could have a rushing touchdown and 60 yards rushing, and one receiver could break out. It might not be. That's
understood. I mean, but what I'm saying is I've played with lineups that have both those wide receivers in them, and whenever I do, I find myself, I'm like, well, why am I not playing Josh Allen in this spot? And the reason is because, I mean, ultimately, you don't think that Drew Brees is a better play in the Dome against the horribly shitty Minnesota Vikings defense for just $100 more?
He might be. He's my other core quarterback play of the week.
Okay. Well, it sounds
Josh Allen in this matchup, man, I think it's going to be a shootout till the end. I mean, the Saints are big favorites at home. I know it's a higher game total. I mean, they could go either way. It could be I looked back, Kirk Cousins I think it was Vikings in week 12 last year. It was at home against the Saints. I mean, Cousins, Diggs, Thielen all did pretty well in that game. So, I mean, it could be a big shootout that forces Drew Brees' hands. I feel like Drew Brees has let us down in a few spots this year where you thought, I mean, I know he's at home, which is a big deal. I like Brees. I just Josh Allen is like a guy. I feel like bottom line, he's going to deliver a serviceable to pretty good fantasy game.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get him at a little bit less ownership because it seems like the Houston Texans, when you look at optimizers across the industry, are popping off as the defense. It looks like it's going to be the chalk. And we should also note that on 4-game slates like this, we don't necessarily have to take correlation and stuff into by necessity. We can't take correlation into quite as big account as we would otherwise. We certainly want our lineups to be as correlated as they can be, but you're going to have to start, one running back on one team versus a running back on the other team, or, have to start a defense against one of your players and stuff. Like, it's once as the pool of plays that we have is now cut in half by like a quarter, we're 1/4 of what our normal pool of players is.
It's kind of down to picking the best plays a little more.
Yeah. And maybe just not saying like it has to be perfectly correlated. And like I have a great lineup here where I love everything, but I got to switch it up because my third wide receiver is going against my defense. Like, you can't think about it like that this week. Any picks on this game that you think are like, do you like the over, the under? What's the over under 43.5? Houston's 2.5-point favorites. If you were putting on your gambling hat, you got
probably over, right? I mean, that's if I'm going to like this game, I'm thinking that's going to be some points in this one.
Shout out to our boy Ani, our producer Ani Sridhar from the Serious Show, showing up here in the chat, I guess on Periscope. He's asking if Kiki Cutie is a viable cheap play, and for me, I'm not going to play him. We probably should have mentioned the cheap Texan options that could come into play at wide receiver 3. And I love Kiki Cutie. I mean, Ani, that we love Kiki Cutie. You booked him for our radio show before. Like he's a that's a golden son, but they hate him. I mean, he's been a healthy scratch, and there have been some games where we've expected him to be able to go, and he doesn't. To me, I think that do you think it's DeAndre Carter, Byron? If you're going to go that cheap, I think it probably is.
I mean, this is where I've been struggling a little bit, is finding like that one or two just uber cheap guys that I can uncover this week. I kept arriving at Duke Johnson, but that's just maybe because familiarity kind of breeding, some interest.
DeAndre Carter, 100% of snaps last week. Let's see what it was week 16. So week 16, which was more like this week's going to be with a healthy DeAndre Hopkins and healthy Kenny Stills. 44% of snaps for that guy. So maybe he had 2 targets, 2 receptions for 44 yards. I believe he's like 31 or 3,200. So I wouldn't play Kiki. But look, on a slate like this, you might have to play somebody kind of weird, to be able to get there. So if I'm throwing the dart on the super weird play, it's not going to be in Darren Fells here. I think it would maybe be on DeAndre Carter on that side, and then on the Buffalo Bills side, I don't even know. I mean, it's Brown and it's Beasley, and it's like Byron said, with the threat that's inherent to playing Josh Allen anyway, finding his stacking partners that aren't going to swindle you via his rushing upside down at the goal line, like that's a tough sell as it is. And so the deeper and deeper we didn't even mention Dawson Knox. Are you going to play Dawson Knox?
No. I mean, he could.
The reason why I ask is on DraftKings, he's 2,900. And when we compare that to just the shittiest bottom of the barrel, I know you hate 2 tight end flexes or like a double tight end, a double barrel tight end, but just consider it. Well, if you're getting down to where your last piece in your flex, I have a feeling if you're building lineups like me, I have a feeling you're probably getting to the point where your flex is just, you're looking at these guys, these super, super cheap wide receivers and stuff. And why not get a guy like, Dawson Knox, who the team sees as a clear they sat him out last week when he was healthy along with the rest of the studs. So, I don't know.
It's a reasonable idea. I mean, just, I'd make sure that if I was doing that is in one of my Josh Allen lineups. So if I get in a Josh Allen lineup where I keep running over my budget and I've got to find a way to cut, and I just can't, and I could pivot off of, and there's only a couple other tight ends I like this week. So if I got to come off those guys, it's a sensible play to make. I guess it's pretty low risk at 2,900. If he gets a touchdown, you're feeling pretty good. I think it's pretty possible, right?
Ani's asking if he's a good pivot off Goddard. I mean, I don't think he doesn't project with the median baseline anywhere near Dallas Goddard if we're considering Zach Ertz to be out, which I think he will be. And we'll get to that game soon enough.
I almost hope Zach Ertz plays and is a decoy.
They're not going to run him out there as a decoy with a lacerated fucking kidney, dude.
Well, you're probably right. I'm just saying I think I might actually hope if he was out there, but very, very limited.
Yeah, well, it would take all the like Dallas Goddard's going to be so heavily owned because it's basically like we're getting Zach Ertz in a good matchup here with all the wide receivers hurt for 5,200.
I mean, those guys had 19
Dallas
targets in week 8 at home against Seattle. 19 targets for Goddard and Ertz. Yeah. So
I forgot that the matchup tool has Seattle as one of like the best matchups in the whole league for opposing tight ends. It's been really, really good.
I mean, Dallas Goddard's the chalk. I said Josh Allen might ever play on the slate. I mean, it seems to me when I look at the slate that Dallas Goddard currently is the chalk on it. Maybe along with Michael Thomas. I mean, but Goddard is the obvious play to me.
Yeah, so to answer Ani, I don't think that Dawson Knox is necessarily a great pivot off of Goddard, but I think it's probably fine. I think it's a 4-game slate, man. Anything's fine if you're playing in the tournament. Any of these, do you remember the 3-game slate on week 16, Byron, whenever it was just the most obvious thing in the world to play Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller against the fucking Bucks? You just stack that game. And then after that game's over, what you say is like, it's a 3-game slate. Like, why am I in a large field fucking tournament playing all the obvious plays like that? Right. So, I mean, anything can happen, but we're just here to help educate you and help you make your own best decisions based on your style of play. All right. Tennessee at New England, 44.5 is the total. That's up actually from 44. We have 56% of the tickets on the over and 79% of the money on the over. So a tiny bit of public sentiment here is that this game should go over, but the sharp money has been pounding the over. The line's moved up a half a point. New England remains a 5-point favorite in this deal, basically 50-50 on whether people are on New England or on Tennessee. The splits for quarterbacks, in their first time in the playoffs, which Ryan Tannehill is, versus the Patriots are absolutely abysmal. But Ryan Tannehill has been leading probably the best offense in football besides the Baltimore Ravens ever since he started, right? And been doing so on pretty little volume and been getting really boom plays from A.J. Brown. I don't know if we can expect it this week. I'll be interested to hear what you think, Byron, after last week with Devontae Parker, what he did against Stephon Gilmore. Do you think A.J. Brown can do it too, or does Belichick say, fuck no, we're not going to let this happen 2 weeks in a row? Do they bracket him? And then what does that say? All right, so we had Belichick this week. He's talked about A.J. Brown. He talked about Jonnu Smith, which we need to pay attention to for when Jonnu becomes a free agent, because he said that Jonnu Smith is the best tight end in the league with the ball in his hands, is what he said about Jonnu.
You can make it a strong argument.
Can you believe Belichick said that about our boy? It's crazy.
I can't run. Jonnu Smith can run, man. We've always known that since we scouted him at the Senior Bowl. We've been high. We thought he was a Delaney Walker Jr. He's got more speed than that. Yeah, and Corey Davis has melted Stephon Gilmore's face once. No Adam Humphries in this game. Maybe one of the cheap plays that we could consider would be Tajay Sharp, because I could see Belichick saying, I'm worried about Brown. We can't let Davis do it to us again. Because you remember Corey Davis had the Randy Moss game versus the Patriots, right? Jonnu's the best tight end in the league with the ball in his hands. Let's let this asshole Tajay Sharp beat us. Because it's not going to be Derrick Henry. We're burying the lead there. I think it's going to be hard for Derrick Henry to have another game like he did last week versus the Texans, for sure. But that's kind of weird, though. We're talking about the Titans, and that's a lot of options for Belichick to have to decide who's going to be shutting it down. I mean, how do you see it? How do you see this going on the Titans side? Not very well.
Right. I mean, do you think that New England is going to? Do you think New England's going to get the easy win at home?
I don't think it's going to be an easy win, but I expect them to put an end to this little run out of Tennessee, or at least to make it not as pretty as it's been out of Tennessee and out of Tannehill later. I mean, for me, when I look at this matchup, the clear play is the Patriots defense. And then what I see behind that is a whole handful. Like this is one of the matchups where you can source a couple of your really cheap guys from. You just got to figure out who the hell it's going to be. So the longer I look at it, the more I think that guy is probably Sony Michel. I believe you can poke around on Mohamed Sanu, maybe N'Keal Harry with the rumblings we're hearing about him this week. And then to your point, Alex.
What is the rumblings about N'Keal?
Well, it's just that Bill
Belichick
Belichick is ready to unleash. The Patriots are ready to unleash N'Keal Harry in the playoffs. No, I think he may even be more expensive than Sanu on DraftKings. When you look at Sanu's been disappointing, obviously, but I think in a playoff game, this is what they got him for. He's the kind of guy that had he's still getting 80-90% snap count. I think the last few weeks, the targets have been there in recent weeks for Sanu, so it's all a calculated risk there. I think you could consider the Burkheads, but to me, the guy that emerged was Sony Michel. I say this is a game that Belichick's going to try to hammer Sony Michel in, and it's a script that I believe can probably support that. So to me, the Patriots defense and the Sony Michel stack, even if you're not that interested in correlations, kind of emerges when I look at this one. And then when you turn it the other side, I agree with you, Alex, that maybe the sneaky cheap play from the other side of things very well could be a Tajay Sharp.
On the Patriots side, I just Rex Burkhead, James White, Sony Michel.
Michel is cheap, man, and he's the one guy that no matter what the game plan, especially in this kind of matchup, he is the big part right out of the gate of the game plan. He's the one that's got the specific role in this situation almost on a weekly basis. It takes the game getting out of hand or them not being able to run with, find any room to run for them to get away from that. So, I mean, their game plan almost every week, it's what I saw in training camp too. I mean, is to get Sony Michel is they want to give that guy the rock early. And then if they can, they'll keep pounding him. If not, then they'll kind of change gears,
Okay. So I'm scared to play him because I just, especially on DraftKings, because he's not going to, it's so funny. They don't even give him a receptions prop at any of these books. He's not going to catch a football.
It's cheap.
And you look down, but he's just 40. Yeah. I mean, what is he? He is 4,600. I mean, he's cheaper than Alexander fucking Madison and Mike Boone.
Boston Scott is $6,800 this week. And not to say that might not still be a good play. That surprised me a little bit, but it's hard to find the cheap guys, man. To me, Michel is one of the very few cheap guys that has a pretty clear line on some action. Whether it'll manifest, I'm not sure, but I firmly believe he'll get his opportunities at least early in the game.
This dude, Keith D16 in the Periscope chat is saying, play the song for your Sony Michel. You gotta get down somewhere.
You have to roll some trash out, man. He'll be the one playing the song on tomorrow when Sony Michel's taking a dive into the end zone.
Yeah, well, I mean, he could score twice.
Isn't it a game script that could set up for him? I mean, on the other side of things, you do think Mike Vrabel could have a little bit of surprise in store for Belichick. I mean, the Titans defense could be at some point you got to draw the line. If you told me that was a sneaky play, given how bad the Patriots offense has been and given Vrabel's familiarity and even Tannehill's familiarity and, maybe Titans defense is a sneaky one-off play kind of there with Tajay Sharp. And we'd also mentioned Jonnu Smith, pretty clearly one of the tight ends coming into focus, like cheap tight ends coming to focus on the slate.
Yeah, but he's squarely in Belichick's focus too. That's when Belichick says stuff like that, man, I really kind of worry. It reminds me of how he used to treat Charles Clay back when he was a Miami Dolphin.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a guy that reminds you a little bit of a Charles Clay with more speed.
Yeah. Okay. And then I just also wanted to say about Sanu, I'm with Byron. I don't necessarily believe all the hype about N'Keal Harry, despite the fact how much I love him. And if Mohamed Sanu is actually 200 cheaper, and when you look at it, it's like the last 3 weeks, he's averaging 6 targets a game. And I know that they spent a first round pick on N'Keal Harry, right? I know that happened, But I also know that was a prospecting pick. That was a pick where you pick a guy, you get him in, you're not sure what you have. You work the game plans to figure out what it is that you have in him through the course of the season. He's had health concerns, all this stuff. So that's why I'm making the point. They gave up a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu in the middle of the year, right? Which is, to me, is a different allocation of draft capital. It's not a prospecting pick. That's a pick where you better have a fucking plan for what you're going to do with this guy.
Man. He's going to get the targets.
I mean, that's and what do the Patriots plan on? They plan on the playoffs. They're like Mohamed Sanu, just from a purely narrative-driven standpoint, right? To go on top of the fact that he's averaged 6 targets a week for the past 3 weeks. Like, from a purely narrative-driven standpoint, it feels like very Patriots-ish, especially with Edelman being banged up, for Mohamed Sanu to be a guy that gets involved in some. Maybe he throws a pass or like.
That's what I was going to say. That's the thing you can't forget about Mohamed Sanu. It's the playoffs. I won't be surprised to find out they let him throw the ball. I mean, he's the kind of guy who could throw a touchdown. You can't bank on it, but you're looking for this miraculous cheap guy who could have a multi-touchdown game. I mean, he's the guy who can get it in a couple of different ways.
How worried are you about Edelman? Are you going to play him? Because Edelman in the playoffs, his target numbers go up, his reception numbers have gone up. Edelman's been just such a G and such a goat in the playoffs. And his price tag on here, especially on DraftKings, it's like, what's the price tag? It's $6,500. I mean, could you play DK Metcalf or somebody like that for $400 less and not just find the $400 to get up to Edelman?
That's a good question. I mean, when you look at what DK Metcalf did against the Eagles earlier this season, it wasn't so inspiring. It makes you think maybe you get off for an Edelman instead of a PPR. I hadn't been on Edelman that much, but the more we sit here and talk about it, I mean, the problem is there's just a whole slew of guys that are like 6,000 plus, and it doesn't take long. You get a handful of those guys in your lineup, and you're really stuck trying to find the cheap ones. So I like Edelman. He hasn't been one of my guys in focus for me to this point, but if you can make a lot of sense out of that, it's probably a reasonable play, man. I might have to revisit Edelman a little bit.
We got this guy Brad Beat in the Periscope chat saying, why such disrespect for Henry? The Pats have not beaten anyone and they don't have Gronk anymore. I don't know what having fucking Gronk has to do with Derrick Henry. So, but I mean, it's just.
I think he thinks the game script could set up well for Derrick Henry.
Right. Look, man, it's like, so versus Pittsburgh in week 1, James Conner got 8.5 fantasy points. Versus Kenyon Drake and Mark Walton didn't do anything with Miami. In week 3, Le'Veon Bell got you 8 fantasy points. Week 4 was Buffalo and no one did anything. Week 5 was Washington, nobody did anything. Week 6 was Giants, Sands, Saquon Barkley clearly did anything. Week 7 was Le'Veon Bell again, 8 points. Week 8 was Nick Chubb, who got you 10.3 points. Nick Chubb was right up there with Derrick Henry to be the leading rusher in the league up until Derrick Henry's last rush of the 2019 season. Mark Ingram against them, one of the bigger games, he had a 13.4 pointer against these guys. Zeke Elliott had a 14 pointer. The only other big games that they've given up have been Duke Johnson had a big game thanks to a touchdown and 6 receptions for 17.5. And then in week 15, Joe Mixon had an inexplicable game whenever that was the game when they were just beating the living shit out of the Cincinnati Bengals, and they just kept on handing the ball to Mixon for some inexplicable reason. I think he had 26 carries in that game alone. And 3 targets as well. So 29 touches. So that's why. It's like, if you have a good running back, Bill Belichick's he's going to scheme to take him away. I'm not paying the highest price on the slate for him. It's pretty simple to me.
I was struggling finding a high priced running back option that I even wanted to really put in my suite of trends and picks for the week as far as our internal inputs. Man, it's hard to find one. I just ultimately said, man, I'm going to play the matchups, and if I got to spend up Dalvin Cook has the better matchup on paper than Derrick Henry, and it's a game where the pace could get pushed a little bit more too.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on to the big one, Minnesota, New Orleans. This total is up to 49.5. 82% of the tickets on the over, 93% of the money on the over. It's in the Dome. It's Drew Brees. It's Michael Thomas. It's Alvin Kamara. It's Jared Cook. It's lit, right?
Yeah, it makes you think that, you can't really have more than a couple quarterback plays on the small slate. There is some consideration for getting a Kirk Cousins lineup in. I think either Vikings wide receiver could go have a good game. If you look back, they both did last year. At this point, you just can't trust Thielen. And surprisingly, the pricing's not that different on DraftKings on Diggs.
No one will play Thielen, based on this.
That could make it a weird contrarian play. But, if you're trying to be rational, I think you look at Diggs and you say that's probably a solid play. In a game where there are 8-point underdogs with a rising game total, you can make an argument Kyle Rudolph is a potentially solid play. I think it's a decent matchup for him. In that one, if you wanted to do something a little bit sneaky and cheap at tight end, if you can't get in on Goddard and you're not ready to dumpster dive with the Dawson Knoxes of the world, I think in this situation, Kyle Rudolph starts to make a little bit of sense. And then, not in love with the Vikings running backs based on the matchup, but when I was trying to look for a high-priced guy, I just kept coming back to Dalvin Cook.
Yes, people aren't going to play Dalvin. They're not going to play Dalvin. Everybody's going to want to play Kamara. I've been messing around with playing Brees, Thomas with Dalvin, maybe Dalvin on the other side, even though it's really scary because of the way the Kamara's been playing recently.
The Vikings going to need their big guns in this one. This is the fast track, sets up perfectly for a guy like Dalvin, player I could see getting very involved in the receiving game this week. So, I'm not sure how many Dalvin lineups I'll have, but if I'm trying to get an expensive running back, I think he's a good place to start.
Well, that sounds like you're not interested in Kamara.
No, I'm interested in Michael Thomas and Drew Brees. And so Alvin Kamara he was decent in this matchup last year as well when he was still splitting with Mark Ingram. And so there's something to like there, but I don't know. Alvin Kamara just hasn't really been doing it for us, man.
He's been doing it the last couple of weeks. I think Kamara, this Vikings defense is bullshit.
That's why I want Michael Thomas and Brees. I suppose you can have Kamara. I don't know, man. Overall, the touches haven't been there for Kamara.
It's been good. It's been good lately, and they've been talking about how they need to get him back to. I could have understood your point, but I guess last week he did. Yeah, only 8 attempts last week. He did all that shit on 10 touches last week.
I'm telling you, man, he's not getting the touches overall. They're hard to predict. Even that game against Tennessee, where I thought he was going to break out a couple weeks ago. I think he ended up with a decent game, but it was
three out of the last 4 weeks. He's gotten at least 17 touches.
Yeah, but how many? Okay, well that's not enough, man. It could be enough, but we need more. How many touchdowns how touchdown dependent has he been recently?
Over the course of the last 2 games?
Last 2-3 games.
Probably like 75%.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But we knew that he was in a touchdown drought from week 4 to week 16. All
right. Well, you flipped tails last time. Doesn't mean we're gonna flip heads this time, right?
That's certainly a rule of probability. I forget what that rule is called, or that
mutually exclusive event. There's no relationship between the two events.
It's not like a prisoner's dilemma or something like that.
Rorschach test. I don't
know. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think we got a couple of questions here. Are you worried at all? Michael Yeager asks, are you worried at all about Cook re-aggravating the shoulder? That's from the YouTube chat. Michael Yeager also says Taysom Hill, his swindle always worries him. So Taysom Hill is a quarterback on DraftKings, only 4,500. I could see weirder things than just playing him and just hoping he gets you a touchdown and 12 points or something. He's basically a min-price tight end over on FanDuel. But I've toyed with the idea of playing Taysom Hill. If you play Taysom Hill on short slates and on showdowns and stuff this year, you probably and you've made a rule of that, you've probably been kind of profitable. He seems to show up in these island games. So I'm not. I don't think I could ever play him. And Brad beat this guy we were berating earlier, was saying that he's been a pro member for years. So thank you, Brad Beat, for that. We appreciate your support. Much love to you, brother. We're just explaining to you why we kind of didn't spend too much time on Derrick Henry. All right, and this next question here in the Periscope chat was from T-Runs10. He's asking about a Greg Ward dumpster dive. We'll get to that in 1 minute when we talk about the Seahawks and the Eagles. Or I guess we could get it to that now, right? Oh, I wanted to mention though about Stephon Diggs. Monster games versus the Saints. Just look at his game logs. Look at his last 3 games versus the Saints. It's been fucking 3. It's been 3 explosions.
It's showtime. He's on the fast track. I mean, it's a pretty obvious play. And the more you look at that, the reason I like DK Metcalf, but a similar price point. And the more I look at it, maybe I'm getting a little more comfortable with Stephon Diggs.
Seattle at Philly. We have Seattle here as 1.5 point favorites. 83% of the tickets are on Seattle minus 1.5. Only 69% of the money. We have Philly here that has a 45 total. The game's got a 45 total. That's down from 46. Philly, of course, 1.5 point underdogs. We have 58% of the tickets here on the under, 81% of the money on the under. So this thing is just this thing is the total is it's fallen a point since when I looked yesterday. Money's coming in on the under. But Russell Wilson doesn't have his running backs. All he's got is Travis Homer and the mummified rotting corpse of Marshawn Lynch, who managed to somehow get in for a touchdown last week. We saw, I think Jerron Brown got ruled out earlier today. So we got Tyler Lockett. Hollister, DK Metcalf. There are ways where you can see Russell Wilson saying, all right, look, I got no running game. I have to put this team on my back, and the way to beat these Eagles. I mean, those cornerbacks, who was it? Was it Avonte Maddox and Cre'Von LeBlanc last week? That sounds like two guys that we go to go watch him perform at a rave. I mean, what do you think, man?
Pretty tough call.
Russell Wilson could take this game over, dude. He's a true GOAT.
Pretty tough call for me all week who QB3 on the slate was. Is it Cousins? Is it Wilson? You can certainly subscribe to the logic that you just laid out and go Wilson. I thought long and hard about that. The more I just kind of look back at what happened last year in this matchup, even though it was at home in the Dome in Minnesota, I warmed a little more back up to Cousins on that side of things. But I mean, I see that. It's an interesting. I mean, I'm pretty much. Some of me thinks that no running game for the Seahawks could, counterintuitively, it could have a negative effect on the offense, on the passing game. We look back to week 8, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf didn't really do anything in that game to begin with. We'd kind of seen that trend of the Eagles secondary improving there over the second half of the season. I think the last few weeks, maybe it might have come back down to earth a little bit there. So, I mean, but to your point, if you can choose the Seahawks running back that's going to get in the end zone, I mean, what is the pricing on Lynch? I remember thinking he was maybe a little more than I was expecting him to be.
You can't play Marshawn Lynch.
5,200 is just too much, man. He's a guy like 4,000. You know what I mean? I'd rather play Sony Michel.
Click on Travis Homer's on his little card here in DraftKings. And just look, man, 8 targets, 5. He's averaging 6.5 targets over the course of the last 2 games per game. Played a third of the snaps this last week. I mean, I'm sorry, 2/3 of the snaps this last week. I think Travis Homer's the play if you're playing one of these running backs.
Why is he not cheaper, man? It's astounding to me how expensive even some of the low end guys are this week.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think that's the way to do it. And on the Philly side, and then what about Hollister? Just you can't find yourself getting there with.
It's not a good matchup, man.
Right. Okay. I'm just checking. I mean,
it's not a good matchup.
Rank your interest in the Seahawks outside of Wilson? Just the top 2 or 3. Is it Lockett, Metcalf?
Yeah, I mean, it's yes. I mean, that's
you're not on board with the Homer stuff, are you? You're just not on board.
I mean, it may be. That's a guy I want to look down and see his price tag at like $3,800, $4,100.
Like Boston Scott these last few weeks.
Yeah, Boston Scott's almost 6,000 on this deal. I mean, so that raises the question: what are you doing anything on the Eagles side with their running backs? I mean, are you just all in? I think we're all in on Dallas Goedert. What's his ownership projection going to be? It's got to be astronomical.
Well, you're getting Zach Ertz for $5,200 in a matchup where all the wide receivers are hurt. That's what Goddard is. Goddard's Zach Ertz.
He's the guy you have to play this week. It's like he's the Jalen Samuels or the Madison or the whatever it is of years and weeks past that was like the clear cheap guy you had to get into your lineup. The Miles Sanders at various times. Just this week it's Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, and with Miles Sanders, he's banged up. He says he's going to play. We had somebody tweet earlier in here that it was Miles Sanders' season. T runs 10. It was Miles Sanders' season coming up. I think that he is a Eagles fan. I'm pretty sure that this guy's an Eagles fan with the way he's talking. But I don't know if I'm going to play Miles Sanders. I just feel like Boston Scott's earned a little bit of time, and Jordan Howard now. Yeah. Back healthy. I feel like this could be a time where we get swindled for maybe
time to pull the plug on Sanders this week.
Yep. He's been great, but it's like I'm not going to go back. The one play I love, Byron, that if we get no Zach Ertz, which it seems like we won't, is going to be Josh Perkins, who's lining up, who's 2,900. He's a tight end, and the reason why I'm thinking about going this double tight end is he's 2,900. He's cheaper than the cheapest of any of these 3K wide receivers. And you look at last week, or let's say like the week before last, you had Josh Perkins in there for 39% of snaps. And then last week, when you had Goddard in there, you had Perkins in there for 78% of snaps. Perkins had a 15-point game on DraftKings, 6 targets, 4 receptions for 50 and a touchdown. They're lining him up out of the slot. He's better than a lot of the wide receivers like Greg Ward and stuff who they have out there right now. They aren't playing J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at all. They picked up Homeboy. Who's that Homeboy that threw to Darnold at his pro day, or Darnold threw to his pro day? That asshole they got off the Titans. Deontay Burnett. And then who like Robert Davis is kind of interesting. He played 78% of snaps last week, but only 2 targets on the game, no catches. I think for this one, if we're looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, for once in my life, I can get on board with 2 tight ends, and I can play Dallas Goedert, and I can play Josh Perkins. All right, that's it, brother. That's the pod. Thanks to everybody for watching on YouTube, Periscope, etc. Find all our content at RosterWatch.com. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen, you can find us. Peace.